Welcome to Kootenai Bonsai. It's second week of December, I think it is here. It's a beautiful, beautiful day. Normally we have a lot more snow here, but I'm visiting a good friend of mine, Kenneth, and we're checking out some of his trees. So here's the first one we're going to talk about here. Tell us about this tree a little bit there.
So this tree came out of a hedgerow. It itself was not a hedge. The hedges it was growing in were cedar. So it was really starved of light, and it was just destined to be chipped.
What kind of tree is this here?
This is a bit of a mystery.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure it's a Zelkova of some kind. I don't really have any of the leaves that have dropped hanging around. That might be one. You can see the pattern there. They didn't know what it was. They didn't remember planting it. So yeah, it was just cut down to be removed. I said, no, I'll try to rip it out. So a couple of hits with the shovel and just ripped her out of the ground, and that was 2 years ago this spring.
Okay, wow.
So it can kind of show you
and
stuff that's destined.
And did you cut all these tops off then? Is that?
Yeah. So what it was essentially these two bits. You can see a major cut here and a major cut here.
Yep.
Upright is probably about 6 feet tall.
Okay.
This primary line here was just probably the smallest branch on the tree at that time.
Right.
And it is thickened up like crazy.
Yeah.
It just got styled as the leaves were dropping about a month ago, I suppose.
Okay, nice.
Uh,
And with these branches all just sticking straight up, kind of thing.
yeah. It was all just sucker growth.
Yep.
From the hard cut back. So this little hollow feature
was
existed on it already.
I was gonna say that's such a nice feature there.
Yeah.
And how long will you leave the cut paste on?
Till it dries and kind of wants to fall off naturally.
Okay.
It probably wasn't even really all that necessary. It wasn't a tree that was bleeding particularly heavily, but
Yeah.
just why not? It's good practice.
Well, and I love this Nabari here.
Yeah.
So nice, right?
The front.
Yeah.
The way it's orientated right now is probably not quite correct. Probably somewhere out this corner.
How come? The corner? Why not right on straight?
Right on straight. It's kind of like it's very two-dimensional looking at these two trunks.
Yeah, right.
It's just like someone,
Yeah.
not particularly interesting. And the Nabari on the side is kind of spindly. You can't see it now, but there's some hard cuts and whatnot just under the soil.
Okay.
So if it does get exposed, that would be really obvious kind of sign of that. So we rotate it just slightly.
Right. It really gets rid of that V there. In the middle.
Yeah, a little
that's
bit
nice.
more interest there, and it really plays into the idea that this side here is forcing the direction out of this side, and the whole tree will be moving this way.
Oh yeah.
But there's that kind of that parent trunk idea where the other one's above it and forcing the direction into it.
Okay. Nice. Yeah,
So
I like that.
That's the thought there.
Yeah, that's great.
Styling, somewhere between a natural and a, what you'd say more of a typical bonsai design. I want the shoulders to all be upward,
Okay.
not downward like most conifers.
Yeah.
So tried to be consistent with that. So from here on out, yeah, these branches are very leggy. There's no ramification on them yet, but wire them into the spot that I want them to eventually be. And as these back buds start to push, I can then cut to them and then continue to build it out to the length they're at now with the new ramification. But if I go just cutting back all the way now, it's going to be hard for the tree to decide where it's putting its strength and vigor if it's all in the same place at once. So if I leave all this tissue here, I let it start to grow, then I cut back, the tree will already have decided that's a good spot to put resources because it already had resources moving through there.
Yeah, right.
So I cut it then, and then hopefully that means I'll get more rapid development.
Okay.
I did a little bit of cutting throughout the season just in the crown, just to see how it responded.
Yeah, right.
And you can see how tight things can get, even fertilizing really aggressively in a really coarse substrate as well.
Yeah, well, you can see really nice buds forming up here.
Yeah, so
if the camera can zoom in a bit, but yeah. Okay.
So
That's cool. And talk a little bit about the shoulders coming up versus down. Like what's
the idea behind that is most deciduous will have an upward movement from the shoulders, right?
Yep.
Like a pine or juniper or whatnot. You can have upward movement from the shoulders, but frequently, especially in higher elevations, you've got this downward movement, right?
Yeah.
And that's very classic. and you see that put into deciduous trees, particularly in Japan, and it looks great.
Yeah.
And for some trees, that's exactly what they suit. But I think when you have the option, when you're starting from scratch, just that little bit of an upward movement at the beginning,
Yeah.
and then you can move down. You can move up, 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 and then start to arc down. Because you'll see that on big old deciduous trees, especially at tips on the lower branches. If there's light down low, that's where they'll grow, right?
Okay.
But always upward at the shoulder, because that's where the light was when they started growing.
Yeah, and I imagine there's a certain amount of consistency there too.
Yeah.
With the tree overall, you're not going to want one of these branches hanging down like this and then have all the other ones coming up, right?
No, I mean, you say that, but you look around in nature, especially cottonwoods, you'll find they've got these massive upward subtrunks or branches, especially near the crown. You'd have these massive branches, and lower massive branches all going up, barely down. But then you see, I don't know if it's sucker growth or growth that's always really slowed down low, that just immediately moves down.
Okay.
And it's tiny. So there is the opportunity to have a little bit of inconsistency.
Okay.
But straight out the gate, I'd like to have that look. There's a lot of redundant branches on this tree.
Okay.
But for now, I'll style everything like I want to keep it all, and then I can make decisions later on, especially if it's starting to cause structural flaws.
Yeah.
But for now, I got lots of options where I want to take it, and pretty happy for 2 years.
Yeah, well, it's amazing, especially, and it's nice getting the bark like this, especially on deciduous.
Yeah.
You often don't get bark that has this much kind of character.
Yeah,
So
I'm hoping that'll be to my benefit if I get any wire scars.
Right,
they'll disappear. But, I'll try to be vigilant stopping that, but it's tough.
So tell us about this tree.
So this is a Boulevard Cypress. It came out of my boss's backyard. I don't know what his intention for it was, but it was pruned as a hedge, just in the middle of a field, not much bigger than it is now. So difficult tree to deal with, because if you imagine this being a hedge, just a big kind of egg-shaped ball, and it had been trimmed like that for quite a while. One thing about these false cypress is they do not like the back bud whatsoever.
Yeah, okay.
So you've got all this density right at the tips, shading out everything inside of it. So you're left with, well, just growth out of the tips. So getting a really kind of classic design out of it wasn't going to be an option, because the branches that I had, which were numerous, were all just kind of pom-poms out of the tips.
Okay.
So left with the idea of how to style something like this. You can kind of picture this as a tree standing alone in a cut block. It's got all this available light to it now, but exposed to the wind and kind of harshness of the weather. So the thought was, styling it, that there was obviously some kind of a leader coming up the center here, and you had all these secondary trunks just kind of waiting for their chance, right? Leader gets ripped off by whatever, and they all jump at the opportunity, right? So something down low really tried to be the new apex, came up a little short. The old highest point, despite losing one of its tops, picked up the slack and is kind of getting there again. And even what was obviously just a branch, put something upright, tried, but is getting competed out by the true apex of the tree.
Did you? It looks like, I mean, there's a bunch of movement in this. Is this from previous wire, or is this just natural?
Yeah, it's some of the movement's natural. It had been wired once before.
Okay.
It was a very we'll say novice wiring project. I think it was one of the first trees I wired.
Okay.
Even now, I mean, the wire job isn't perfect, but I'm starting to get the movement that I wanted kind of out the gate. Just a little bit more technique and choosing the appropriate gauge to get the movement to hold.
Yep.
All this deadwood
I was going to ask
along
you
the
about
trunk.
that. It's just gorgeous. I love this.
So that was always the intent, was to have some really obvious point of damage on the trunk. And it just so happened, I think, when we dug this up, as you follow this root down, we did enough damage to the roots that that side of the trunk died anyways.
Okay.
So it just sort of happened to be in the perfect spot, I think.
Are you gonna carve in there at all? Are you gonna think you're gonna leave that?
Yeah, I'll leave it for another year or two just to kind of weather a bit and see what it does.
Yeah.
And then yeah, I'll try my hand at some carving through there. Nothing too extravagant. Like, this isn't a desert tree, so it's not
Right.
going to have that really sandblasted, textured, grainy
Yep.
kind of idea.
Well, and I love the blue.
Yeah.
It's like the color. I mean, I don't know if the camera will capture it, but you can.
Yeah.
It's just that blue, and then you have these nice contrasting
Yeah.
colors here. It's just awesome.
And the bark is quite plated. It's somewhat similar to a thuya, to a red cedar or something like that.
Yeah.
But a little bit more plated, and I think it's quite interesting. Similar to a hinoki.
That's great. Tell us about this tree. This is a.
So this is a western white pine.
Okay, nice.
So it's a 5-needle pine, similar enough to a Japanese white pine or a limber pine, something like that. So the needles are naturally quite long, very, very soft.
These are single flush too, right?
Single flush, yeah.
Yeah. They also have that much more bluer.
Yeah.
Tinge. It's nice seeing one that's developed a bit. So
Yeah.
I've collected a few, and I love like you said, there's this soft fluffiness to them, and I just love that feature.
In my opinion, they're the best smelling conifer too.
Okay.
Yeah, when you're cutting them certain times of the year, it just, even one little cut will fill a room.
That's awesome.
This beautiful fragrance. So this came into my hands quite a long time ago, probably 7 years ago. It was likely my first tree. It came from a friend. They pulled 3 of them out of a gravel pit just for the heck of it. The other 2 are dead that they kept.
Yep.
They were pencil sized when it all started.
Okay, wow.
So this one's
and you're saying
picking
like
up a fair bit.
5 years from like a finger size.
Yeah,
Or even less, maybe pinky there.
yeah. It was.
Wow.
It was really quite
Well,
small.
and the bark too on that development of the bark compared to, I mean, often you see some of these white pines that I've collected or whatever, the bark is just so smooth.
Yeah.
It doesn't have any sense of age to it. So that's cool. That's amazing. So you're saying, you said 5 years, right? Maybe 6.
Maybe 6 or 7.
Oh, 6 or 7. Okay, yeah. Yeah, still.
So, and I think the tree had been out of the sand for maybe a couple years prior to that.
Oh, okay.
So,
Yep.
all things considered, relatively fast development, but again slowed down by my my own inability at that time.
Yeah.
It finally got repotted into the angle that I thought would be best for it.
Where are you thinking the front is? What are we looking at?
Probably somewhere in there. I can't quite see from the phone's perspective.
Yeah.
But definitely all these fat roots gripping the soil, and trunk movement again this way. Primary branch is likely going to be built out of something down here.
Yeah.
And really drop below the pot.
Okay.
They're quite forgiving.
Yeah.
They handle wire quite fine. Most of this wire will be cut off sometime this spring.
Yeah, well, you got a lot of nice movement coming up here, and
Yeah.
you know, it's unfortunate as the phone never captures the movement quite as well as I'd hope. That's cool.
Yeah.
I like having that lower arm too. It does something for the design on that one.
Yeah, and it's helping to thicken up this lower portion of the trunk quite nice. It's kind of obscured here, but I would really like this portion to thicken up enough that it actually makes contact with the soil.
Okay.
Because now you've kind of got this very sharp line.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it'd be nice, because this is off a root. So as that root thickens up, that'll get pushed closer and closer to the soil.
Yeah. Oh, it's great. So there's a lot of nice movement in that one.
Mm-hmm. And it's really flexible wood. So
Yeah, and it looks like you've gotten the needles to come down in size a bit, like length.
yeah,
I mean, not tons. Some of the new ones are long. Right?
Yeah, it has been fertilized pretty aggressively all year round. As this tree gets closer and closer to being refined and kind of less developmental stage, hold off on the fertilizer in the springtime.
Yeah.
Another thing to keep the needles relatively small is timing. Similar to a ponderosa, there's a certain time of year to cut it where you're not going to put all that extra energy into the needles that are still elongating.
Mm-hmm.
So unlike a ponderosa where you cut when the needles, the third year needles are dropping, you'll want to do pruning work on these right as the sheaths are dropping. So the candle will extend, open up, and eventually the kind of casing of that candle will start to fall off. It's just these crumbly little bits. And if you just tap the tree like that, they'll start dropping. It's sometime middle summer. You can prune then, and the needles have already fully elongated for that year, so they won't go longer on you. And you'll also you'll reduce the amount of energy that it's going to store during the fall. Less energy stored during the fall means a slightly weaker push come spring, so shorter needles come spring. If you wait to do this pruning work in the fall or spring, it's had all that time to kind of reaccumulate and all that, and store the sugars. So that'll keep them small. Another thing worth noting on pruning these is if you do it during that time where the sheaths are dropping, the elongated growth from the candle, you can cut anywhere inside of that. Just be real careful that you're not cutting across needles, that you're getting in there and cutting inside of them. You'll get a bud right at that cut site.
So will you come down to like 2 or 3 needles then? Or you?
It's basically pruned to the silhouette that you want.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, you can cut to increase ramification in a sense, because where you cut, you'll often get more than one bud.
Yeah, okay.
But it's not like a black pine where you decandle, then you expect this plethora of buds to emerge from that cut site.
I see.
You're going to get between 1 and 2.
Yeah, right.
So yeah,
and you're saying so right when the needle or the candle comes out, needles have sort of shot off, and then the sheath's just coming off. What time of year is that for us here in the Kootenays?
It's middle summer.
Middle summer. Okay.
Springs are so unpredictable here in the Kootenays that I can't really put it on a firm month. But yeah, sometime middle of summer. Just check your trees regularly, and it's real simple.
And
the needles be fully developed, and if you just tap the tree, you'll see these little flaky bits coming off the branch tips.
Okay.
And it's a really clear indicator. As far as I'm aware, all 5 needle pines behave like that.
Okay, yeah, that was going to be my other question. Well, that's good. I'm glad you're telling me this, because I was going to prune it earlier in the year when they were just starting. The candles were just starting. I was like, I'll just chop it like a...
Yeah, I mean, if you're in development mode and you really don't care about needle length, by all means, spring's going to be the best time for the tree to cut. But you can't go cutting along the length of the candle at that point, because one, they don't exist. They're just hardened shoots at that point. And if you cut back to where there's no bud, you're likely just going to kill the tip of that branch, right?
Kill the whole tip, yeah. Right.
So, yeah, you got a lot of flexibility pruning in the middle of summer.